The law of God governs the entire universe. This is the same law that Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob followed. This law was codified through Moses on Mount Sinai. Today, this law is all but forgotten in America. Discover how this law can bring you either blessings or curses. Learn how this perfect law of liberty can be followed today.
This is kind of what we're going to look at. We're going to do a tabernacle overview first, where we're going to look at the layout of the tabernacle and the implements. This is just going to be a quick overview, not a lot of detail, just so we understand what we're talking about. Then we're going to look at the purposes for the tabernacle, and I've identified 3. There's probably more, but the 3 main ones I've noticed in my study is it's a hospital, it's for food regulation, and it's a judicial system. And we see it as a religion today, and that's really not what it is. Okay, and that's kind of I'm trying to get out of that religious mode. Okay, and then we're going to define the offerings and what they were for. But before we begin, I'm going to do this every time because it's really important. We need to remember the law of God is for our good. God said that it is for our good always, that He might preserve us alive as it is at this day. The law of God defines righteous living. It doesn't provide our righteousness, but it defines it. It tells us what we're supposed to be and how we're supposed to act. The only way to understand God's law is to do God's law. Psalm 111:10 says, "A good understanding of all they that do His commandments." James said the same thing. He said, "Be a doer of the word, and not a hearer only, deceiving your own selves." Deception is the opposite of understanding. And so we don't want to be deceived. We want to be men and women of action. When studying the law of God, we err when we treat it as a religion. It is a law, it needs to be studied as law. Israel was a nation, not a church. We need to compare Israel with other nations. The law of God is a national law. So we're going to compare Israel, not with the church, but with America, and see how it fits and how it looks. And then finally, the law of God is compared to a mirror and should be used to look back at yourself, not towards others. And I think that's the most important part, because we are going to find out as we go through all the commandments that every single person in this room is guilty of several of them. And it's our goal in this process of sanctification to learn more and more and try and change our lives into that image of God, which is what Jesus was. That's what the Messiah was. He fulfilled all the law. He was a picture of what God wants. The law defines who He is, and the Messiah is that picture for us. A quick overview of my study. In 2008, I started this. There's 756 commandments, statutes, and judgments. They fit under 87 titles of law. You can see how many commandments right next to each title. They all fit under the 10 commandments, which fit under the 2 great commandments. And the reason I picked this is obvious. That's the way the Messiah said to do it. That's the way Jesus described it. Last week, we looked at faith in the law of the land. Only 10 statutes. So we got a lot to go through. But that's what establishes the law. Remember, faith establishes the law. The church is missing that today. Once we believe, now the law is real. Now we need to start being obedient. Today we're going to look at all the offerings. And there's almost 100 statutes that we're going to go through today. So when we go through them, I'm going to kind of go fast. I don't think it's going to be as complicated as it might appear at first. But you notice that I have them under the 1st and the 3rd commandment. That's kind of where they fit. The 1st is, "You shall have no other gods before me." The 3rd is, "You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain." So the punitive, the punishment offerings are over there. The other ones are defining who's your God. Some of the assumptions we have is that the tabernacle offerings are abolished. The reason I started studying the Mosaic Law, and specifically the Levitical priesthood first, was because of these assumptions. We've assumed they have been abolished. The problem we have is pretty simple, though. The scripture says they're forever. Are they really forever? The Apostle Paul did them after the resurrection. Why on earth would he do them after the resurrection if they've been abolished? And finally, the millennial temple, when Jesus comes back, when the Messiah comes back, has a brazen altar to do the offerings. Thanks to Chauncey, I have a nice picture to show you guys. There's a brazen altar right in the Ezekiel temple. So we're going to do them again, but perhaps we just don't understand them correctly. And I don't know if we've ever thought of it that way, but maybe we don't understand them correctly. Maybe we're looking at them as a religion, and it doesn't make sense. But if we looked at it as a legal system, it's going to start to make sense. And what we're going to need to do is recognize the difference between a culture from 3,500 years ago to a culture of today. And understand that the spirit of the law is the intent of the lawgiver. So what did God intend? Sometimes he says, this is the commandments, but the intention of that we can meet while still not following the letter. And that's okay if it's necessary. If we can follow the letter, we should, but sometimes we can't. And that's what the spirit of the law means. What did God intend by these laws? And that was all from last week, so I'm not going to get into that, but that's the assumption I have when we do this. Okay, the tabernacle overview. Again, this is really quick. We're not going to get into detail. But if you looked at the tabernacle, it looks something like this. As you cross through the gate, the first thing you would see is the brazen altar, or the bronze altar. This bronze altar was about 8 feet by 8 feet by 5 feet high. So it's pretty big. It was brass over acacia wood. It's where the offerings were burned, the fat and the meat. The purpose, it's basically a barbecue. If you really think about it and understand the differences in the cultures, it's a barbecue. It's the meat that they ate for various different reasons. Okay, after that you'd have the laver. This was a bronze laver. It was solid brass. The size is not given, so we really don't know how big it was. It was made of solid brass. The purpose was used to wash before you did your service. The Levitical priests would wash there before they served. A few other things. The gate is where you did the killing of the animals. There were meat hangers. Now the scripture doesn't say this, but history tells us that. So the articles the Bible talks about weren't the only articles there. There were also butchering stalls, tables to butcher. The scripture supports that because the temple had them. It doesn't say the tabernacle has them, but Solomon built them in his temple. So if you really think of this as to what's going on, those things are all necessary. You're not just going to do it all on the dirt. You know what I'm saying? We did that at the Passover, I know, but it was a little baby goat. When you're dealing with bigger animals, you're not going to just make a mess on the dirt. You're going to have a table. You're going to be organized. Okay? Now, if we entered through the gate, it would look something like this. And this is actually a better picture. But you'd have the bronze altar first, and then the laver second. Okay? And the priest would go into the holy place first. This is a tent. Why did God make it a tent?
Portable.
Portable. The Israelites were first a nomadic society. They moved. They didn't stay local. It makes sense to have it a tent. But we get so stuck on build it exactly like this. But then Solomon didn't. Why? Why was he allowed to break all those specific commandments, those letter of the law?
Because he kept the heart.
He followed the spirit of the law. So we need to understand the letter's important, but it's not nearly as important as that intent. Because the tabernacle and the temple serve the exact same purpose. Okay? If we go into the tabernacle, we would see the holy place. And the holy place has basically 3 items. On the left is the golden lampstand. Okay, the golden candlestick basically. Okay, it was made of pure gold, which was beaten with a hammer. The specific instructions, you can't mold it. You can't melt it down and mold it into this golden lampstand. It had to be beaten. That's a difficult job to do. But that's what the instructions were. It had 7 candles, 6 branches, and it had knops the shape of almonds throughout the branches and the stem. It was to be lit continually. So this was to always have fire burning on it. The purpose, the scripture clearly says, so it lights up the tabernacle. This was their lighting system. That's the main purpose. To the right is the table of showbread. And I have a different opinion on this, so you're going to have to bear with me. It's not in this lesson, but it's in like 3 lessons from now. But the table of showbread was 3 feet by 2 feet by 1.5 feet. I'm not giving you what's the arm length? What do they call that again? The cubits. Because it's just easier for me to understand. I'll translate it. It's just easier to get the understanding that way to me. It was gold over acacia wood, so it was made of wood, then overlaid with gold. It had 12 loaves of bread, and the difference I have is I think that these were leavened loaves of bread. Okay, I don't really want to get into all the details. It's in a future lesson, but it paints a slightly different picture. It's not that critical, but that's just my opinion. It had dishes for bread. Spoons for there were spoons for the oil and pitchers for the bowls and for the bread. It's basically a table to eat. The purpose was for the Aaronic priesthood to eat. I'll give you a hint. This is the communion table. That's what it is. If you trace it through history, it became known as the breaking of bread, and the apostles did it. It's the same table. So it was for the priest to eat a meal, to have an intimate social meal. And then the third item is the altar of incense. The altar of incense was 3 feet by 1.5 by 1.5. So it was kind of narrow but tall. It was gold over acacia wood. It had 4 horns of gold all the way around it. So 4 horns. There was a censer in it to burn incense. And there were 12 bowls around for that incense. It had the sweet spices readily available for the priests. And the purpose was to burn incense twice daily. There's not a better purpose that the scripture gives, but there's another purpose that we're going to get to later because it represents the prayers of the saints. And we somewhat misunderstand that, I think. So the purpose of this was to burn incense. Once in the morning and once in the evening. Okay, behind the altar of incense is the veil. All right, so when they talk about putting something before the veil, that's where it's at. All right, if you look behind the veil, you have the Ark of the Covenant. The Ark of the Covenant was 4 feet by 2 feet by 2 feet. So it really wasn't that big. It was just a small little box that could be carried quite easily. It was probably heavy with all the gold. It was gold over acacia wood, just like the other implements. And it contained the 10 commandments, Aaron's rod, and the pot of manna. Now there's speculation to this. I'm not sure personally, but the pot of manna and the rod might be on the outside. There's 2 verses that describe it. Some say it's inside. Some say, I personally lean towards it being on the outside, but there's one verse that sounds like it's said to be put inside, and I haven't decided yet. But either way, we know these 3 items. We know these 3 items are associated with the Ark of the Covenant. The mercy seat was on top. That's where God dwells. The purpose was to commune with God. This is where the high priest would go and speak with God once a year on the Day of Atonement. So that's what when we're talking about the tabernacle, this is what we're talking about. That's just an overview of what the tabernacle looked like. That way we can have an idea of, what we're getting into. Okay, there are 3 purposes for the tabernacle or the temple. The first purpose is a hospital. Sometimes we miss that. We see a lot of weird stuff going on and we don't quite understand what it means. The sick were brought to the tabernacle and temple to be seen by the priests. Remember, the Aaronic priests were divided into several different categories. They all had different jobs. One of them was a doctor or a physician or whatever they wanted to call them. They dealt with the sick. If they were declared sick by the priest, the man or woman could be quarantined. That's one of the things they would do. It wasn't that the Levites technically went to try and heal them, but they would deal with the sick as it related to the public.
Center for disease control.
Yes, they were the center for disease control. The sick were to seek natural remedies such as herbs and oils. Healing was up to us. They would help, but their main purpose is, to help us heal, which is kind of the way America did it 100 years ago, if you think about it. We do it very differently from the scripture today. Purge me with hyssop. Let me take a lump of figs to recover. Anointing him with oil. These are all natural remedies. This is what the Levite's job was, to teach when it is unclean and when it is clean. This is the law of leprosy. Okay, so God gave us an example of how they were to do this. Teach when it is clean and unclean. In modern terms, to teach when you're sick and when you're not sick. To teach when you're ill versus not ill. That's what they're diagnosing. That's what that term would mean. So the Levites, they were called apothecaries. That word means to compound or make ointment, prepare spices. This was the holistic healing that God was endorsing. Leviticus 13 through 14 gives an example of their healing responsibilities. They're to anoint the upper ear, anoint the right thumb, anoint the right big toe. They were to use cedar wood, which promotes relaxation, emotional balance, and improves focus and wisdom. Hyssop is also used. It's an antiviral and antispasmodic and helps with digestion. Sometimes God only gives us the answer in part. It is our job to study, to show ourselves approved, and learn the whole matter. And I know you guys know where I'm going with this because we've talked a lot about it. But this is what we call today reflexology. All right, it's a system of massage used to relieve tension and treat illness based on the theory that there are reflex points on the feet, hands, and head linked to every part of the body. Okay, this is a holistic way of healing. That's the way God told the Levites to heal. Not with modern pharmacy or drugs that we do today. So here's a couple of examples of the ears, the hands, and the right toe. You can find this online. And you can know exactly where to put what oils. I haven't memorized them, but we have an index in the books that we have that just says this oil right there. And you can learn how to do it. And it's amazing how you'll start to notice after a few months that they work. They really do make a difference. The upper ear, right here on the upper ear, it deals with allergies, blood pressure, liver, tonsils, the appendix, a whole plethora of things that it can affect with you. The right thumb deals with your brain, that's what I just mentioned. Pituitary, sinus, neck, throat, thyroid, pineal gland, that's your hormones and stuff like that. The right toe, very similar, brain, hypothalamus, spine, pituitary, pineal gland, and thyroid. There's several other things this affects you with. But what it's doing is helping you body, mind, and soul. It's helping your body to heal rather than masking a symptom, which is what we do today. So what does this do? This promotes stability and balance in the body so that your body can heal. And it clears addictions, compulsive behaviors, and bad habits. Because the assumption is our illnesses are usually as a result of sin. It can be our personal sin or it can be a national sin. Okay, so we need to make that assumption. They're assuming, okay, that you're doing something wrong. Let's fix it. So incense was on the altar of incense. The Hebrew word for perfume is ketoreth, which means to fumigate. So you'd walk into the tabernacle and it was smoky. It was fumigated. Now, I'll be honest, it says incense, and sometimes I go back and forth on oils versus incense. There's a few verses that makes you think when they were smashing it, it says they smashed it till it disappeared. You can only do that smashing the oleogum into the oil. So sometimes I think I go back and forth. But regardless, it's kind of the same thing. They both do the same purpose. The oils were stacte, which is myrrh, used for an anti-infection, anti-inflammatory, and an antiseptic. Onycha, which is cistus oil, used for anti-hemorrhagic, anti-inflammatory, and immune enhancement. Galbanon was used as a muscle relaxant, an antispasmodic, a cough remedy, and to help with tooth pain relief. And frankincense was used for skin care, stomach ailments, immune enhancement. The tabernacle was fumigated with healing incense or oils. So you'd walk in there and your immune system gets a boost almost immediately. So you think about how you'd want doctors to have their office. This is exactly the way you'd want it to be. The problem we have is God said only to do it in the tabernacle. Why would God say that? Well, first we need to always remember that God said to walk in all of his ways. So I believe that commandment's valid even today. It's for our good always. We looked at that earlier. Second, this blend was for use in the tabernacle. It was to be used in the hospital of the time. Therefore, it could and should be used in our hospitals today. I believe that would be the spirit of the law. We could use that blend, which is a very powerful blend, in our hospitals so that doctors who deal with the sick can have an immune system that works. This is a very strong blend of essential oils. Perhaps this blend is designed to protect the priests. They were dealing with the sick daily, and their immune system probably needed this extra protection. I was doing some research on it. A guy named Kevin Kenward of the American Medical Association states that according to 210,000 records of deceased physicians, the actual average lifespan of a physician is 70 years. That's a little short. That's like 6 or 7 years short. I think like it's 78 for women and 76 for men. I wonder if that's partly why. If you're dealing with the sick that often, is it going to affect you? I'll bet you it is. The priests were the doctors of the Old Testament, and the tabernacle was the hospital. So we should be using an oil blend similar to that in our hospitals. And I think the Spirit of the law allows it. We don't have to look at that verse and get all paranoid like it's something religious. But our tabernacle was the start. God's plan was to grow. The second and third purpose involves the offerings, which is what we're going to talk about now. The 5 offerings. There are 5 offerings. There's the burnt offering, the meat or meal offering, that's a grain offering, peace offering, the sin offering, and the trespass offering. Those are the 5 offerings. Okay, now there's some specific things we need to know about these before we go any further. First, the meal and the peace offering were voluntary. You didn't have to do it. No one's going to make you do it. It's completely voluntary. Nobody had to do it unless they chose to. The sin and the trespass offering are compulsory. Someone is going to force you to do that. It's mandatory. There's no way around it. The burnt offering can kind of be both. The burnt offering and the sin offering and trespass offering are for atonement. But the meal and the peace offering are not for atonement. Nowhere in the scripture will it ever say the peace offering or the meal offering is for atonement. I've looked and looked and looked, and I've never found a verse that says that. But the other ones clearly says that. Keep that in your mind as we continue on. Okay, the first one, it's food regulation. That's the peace offering. It's our butcher statute. That's how we butcher meat. That's how we get meat. The Hebrews were not allowed to eat of their animals unless brought to the tabernacle. So you had to bring your animals to the tabernacle. They were going to regulate the meat. They were required to offer meat so the Levites could have their portion. This is their tithe. This is their portion. They get to eat. They don't get to go raise animals because they're doing the civil service. They're working in the tabernacle. This ensured the proper killing of an animal. The fat was trimmed and the blood drained. You can see clearly Leviticus 3 is the peace offering statute. The very last verse of that chapter says, "It shall be a perpetual statute for your generations throughout all your dwellings that ye eat neither fat nor blood." The whole point is that we eat neither fat nor blood. It was food regulation for our meat. The International Standard Bible Encyclopedia says the same thing. The feast before God on the mount, the peace offerings provided the food. The peace offerings were for food. When you wanted to eat meat, you did a peace offering. It was just that simple. We look at it as a religious thing now, and we don't understand that
We
anymore.
shouldn't, because he was against religion.
He was. I believe our Messiah was so against religion, and it just distorts the scripture. And we need to see it by God's intent. That's what the spirit of the law means. In the New Testament, we had the shambles, remember? Paul said, "Whatsoever is sold in the shambles, that eat, asking no question for conscience sake." Shambles is a butcher stall, a meat market, or a provision shop. This is where the peace offering ultimately went. Look what he said earlier. What's he talking about? A couple chapters. "As concerning, therefore, the eating of those things that are offered in sacrifice to idols." You mean the things sacrificed to idols went to the meat market to be sold, right? This is a butcher statute. We just don't recognize the words. We know that an idol is nothing in the world and that there is none other God but one. So we know there's no other God. So eating meat offered to nobody is not a big deal. But there is one part that's a little different. What about when it's polluted? In Acts, they said don't eat anything polluted of idols. Polluted means to soil, defile, or pollution. We can eat things offered in sacrifice to idols, but not polluted in sacrifice to idols. Well, how do you pollute something in sacrifice? Well, if you violate one of the dietary laws. The whole purpose to the peace offering is that we Eat neither fat nor blood. So if you eat strangled meat, some countries strangle their meat. If I went to their country and I knew that, that's keeping all the blood inside, and now you're eating all the blood. I'm not going to name the countries, but we live right next to one. Not trimming off the fat. Some countries don't do that, and America's kind of a hybrid on this. We allow by law 30% fat in our meat. That's way too much. When Rochelle and I buy meat, we try to buy 90% lean or more. And so we can still choose to follow this statute. Slaughtering of unclean animals is obviously one of those. So we can eat in any temple, a pagan temple, as long as they're doing the peace offering correctly. If they're not, I would avoid eating it. So if we're traveling to a different temple or a different country, I haven't even just defined what I believe a temple is, but we'll get to that in a minute. So the peace offering. It provided the meat for the meat market. It could be sold for 2 days. The third day it was spoiled. Well, that's true. Right. If you cook your meat today and tomorrow, you're okay to eat it. If it's raw, you can't. But remember, the tabernacle cooked it. They didn't have refrigeration. Right. The third day it's spoiled, you throw it out, which is exactly what the scripture says. We see it as a religious thing, and it's not a religious thing. It's a health thing. Okay, food regulation. The peace offering has 17 statutes. So I'm going to try and go quick, but there's a few things I want to point out. These are the 17 things of the peace offering that I found. And I totally admit, I'm changing this all the time. There's probably stuff I missed and stuff it's a work in progress. Just please understand that. The priest received the breast as a wave offering. So when you do a peace offering, the priest gets his portion. That's a payment. The priest receives the right shoulder as a heave offering. That's another payment. He's doing a service. He's getting paid. We'll understand the difference between America now and God's system. They dealt in property. We deal in fiat currency. If you deal in fiat currency, you have no idea what it's like to deal in property. Unless you like to trade or something. It's just a different system. So we don't see it because it's not something we're used to. The offering can be a bull, a sheep, or a goat. These are all 3 clean animals domesticated that you would raise yourself. Later in the scripture it mentions going hunting and how you would handle that as well. Because you wouldn't really bring a deer, because no one raises deer. They're wild animals. They don't domesticate as comfortably as these other animals do. The offerer shall place his hands on the head of the offering. We get real religious about that, but if you've ever slaughtered an animal, you got to grab it by the horns sturdy and then slit its throat and hold it firmly. That's all this is talking about. I don't think there's anything more to it than that. The offerer shall kill the animal at the door of the tabernacle. Bleed it out. All the fat, kidneys, liver, and the rump are to be burned. That's unedible and unusable for us. So we don't use it, so we burn it. The priest shall burn the offering. Okay, now the priest is going to cook the offering. And then the priest shall sprinkle the blood around the brazen altar. Blood's toxic. So as you kill out the animal, you spill it in a bowl. Now you dump it around the altar. Okay, there was many of the pictures, it wasn't in the one I showed up, but many of the pictures have rocks and some place to dump. Just such a thing. It's a drainage into the dirt, which is exactly what God told us to do when we're out hunting, to drain it into the dirt. 9, the peace offering is for food regulation. I've already gone over that one. May eat on the first or the second day. But the third day, you need to burn it and get rid of it. We know why. I just mentioned that earlier. The spirit of the peace offering is that we eat food correctly. You don't want to eat meat after the second day. Question. What's that? That's what I was just getting at. You're jumping right ahead of me. Do refrigerators meet this statute? I think they do. We have goat meat that we butchered over a year ago still in our freezer. Yeah. And I don't feel guilty about eating it. It's perfectly healthy to eat. Because the intent of this law is that we eat neither fat nor blood, that we eat healthy meat. Yeah. So if we have refrigerators now and they didn't, of course we can eat it on the 365th day. As long as it's been frozen. But if our refrigerator went out, which has happened at the church before, we throw it all out. Right? It's happened twice since I've been here. With the refrigerator, you don't eat that meat. 12, it can be for Thanksgiving. Josephus said the thank offerings were designed for feasting those that sacrifice. It's a feast. It's a party. If for Thanksgiving, it must be unleavened cakes or wafers. Josephus also said the meat offerings are consumed together with the animals that are sacrificed. Okay, on a Thanksgiving, on a feast, on a celebration. This is a multi-course meal. Think about their culture. They would eat bread and maybe some meat. But if you're throwing a party, you're going to do the whole thing. We're spoiled today. We have multi-course meals all the time. They didn't. So when you're doing a thank offering or a Thanksgiving offering, this is you're celebrating something. If for Thanksgiving, it must be eaten the first day. Well, that makes sense. When you're going to throw a party, aren't you going to have the freshest food? You're not going to bring leftovers, right? The Thanksgiving meal is very simple in my mind. This could be for a party, a celebration, a wedding, etc. Josephus explains all that. Is a multi-course meal, and it must be eaten the first day because you are to always provide the best food in celebration. We just naturally do that, I think. If everyone's coming over, we're going to have good food. I'm not going to serve bad food. It can be done to fulfill a vow, a contract, a vow. A vow offering can be eaten the first or the second day. Now think about how a vow offering might be done today. A vow or contract offering. I think we would call this a business meal today. If you are contracting with someone, you should decide over the course of a meal. Anytime you're going to do a contract and you sit down and eat with somebody, you're going to know that person and gain their trust. It's going to be a lot harder to break that contract than if you didn't do that. And we still have a resemblance of that today. Most businessmen I know, if they're successful, when they're doing a big, now I'm not talking about small deals. I'm talking about a big deal. That's a lot of money, a lot invested. You're going to sit down and eat with them with a meal. That's what the vow offerings were for. Finally, excommunication is the penalty for breaking the peace offering. Excommunicate, that's a hard word today. It says if you bring it not unto the door of the tabernacle. I don't think this means if you didn't go to the tabernacle. Like so many times, whoa, we don't have a tabernacle, we can't do this. I don't think that's true. I never believe that when someone says that. This phrase means under the authority of the tabernacle. Okay? It is estimated that there were 2.5 million Israelites in the Exodus. This building here that we're in is way bigger than the tabernacle. How can 2.5 million people work with the tabernacle? It's impossible. The tabernacle alone could not serve all of Israel. Moses had already divided the duties of the tabernacle in Exodus 18. He said, make rulers of thousands, rulers of hundreds, rulers of 50s, and rulers of 10. They're going to serve the people. And where did they go? The gates of the city contained the lower courts. All over the cities, in several cities spread out, there were many tabernacles or lower court systems where you could take care of that. You wouldn't have to go to this one tabernacle, and it spread. Like I said, God's plan was Israel's going to grow. So you were excommunicated if you prepared your meat on a pagan altar or in a pagan manner. But it's the pagan manner, it's the incorrect way that I think is the spirit of this law, that we eat neither fat nor blood. And again, it is the food for the offering that we eat neither fat nor blood. That's the purpose of the peace offering. The meal offering is the same thing. It was to inspect grains. Now this one's a little harder to prove, but bear with me on this. The Hebrews were not allowed to eat of their crops until they made an offering. Hebrews were not allowed to eat of their fruit until the fourth year. Hebrews were not allowed to eat genetically modified plants from Leviticus 19:19 and Deuteronomy 22:9. Hebrews were required to offer grain and fruit so the Levites could have their portion. The main reason is so the Levites have their portion. So if you were a farmer, you'd bring all your crops to the tabernacle to pay for the priests. This is what led to the kosher laws today. Now, if you look at how the Jews look at the kosher laws, it comes from the word kasher. It means fit, acceptable, to be straight or right. The Jews use this term, they even have a certificate for it, to determine what is acceptable food. Kashrut is a term used throughout the oral law to describe the priest's duties to regulate food. That's where the rabbis got this idea from. That's why they have such a strict regulation of kosher food. Since Hebrews were required to bring of the first of their crops, the Levites could inspect if the food were acceptable. I believe that's why they have to put it in their hand. I'm going to show you why in a minute. Like I said, this is a little speculative, but I think it matches the peace offering. There are 9 statutes. Shall be a fine flour with oil and frankincense. The priest shall take a handful and burn it on the altar. That's what I was talking about. This, I think, is an inspection process. I think we'll see that in just a minute. The priest receives the remainder of the offering. So he gets his portion, just like the scripture said. It can be cakes of fine flour with oil. It can be baked in an oven or a pan. If cooked, it shall be cut in pieces. Cannot contain leaven or honey. I think that's critical. This is food regulation. Cannot contain yeast or honey. Yeast alters flour. It does. It just alters flour. If you're going to test it and check it, you don't want yeast in it. Honey feeds the yeast.
But they didn't have yeast like we have, wasn't it? Wild?
Well, it was wild yeast, which is why we put yeast into it. My wife bakes bread and she throws yeast into it. Normally they'd have to let it sit and build and grow. So it would be a lot easier. Well, it's probably a lot easier now, but you would have a set aside piece that you would throw in the lump to get it to start fermenting, basically, I guess.
What we're talking about is making this without that piece they throw in.
Yes, just the dough made right away. First fruits shall be green ears of corn mixed with oil and frankincense. Okay, the meal offering. Provided food for the priest. It was called the covenant of salt. That's what that covenant is to provide food for the priests. It could not be eaten until the first fruits were offered. And this was a food inspection process. The priest would inspect a handful before it could be used publicly. Look what we do in America today. This is our wheat and flour testing methods, a guide to understanding wheat and flour quality, version 2. Look how similar this is. The grade determining factors are test weight, heat damage. I wonder if that's why it was cooked. And total damaged kernels. The damaged kernels is a grade determining factor and is composed of 2 categories, heat damage and total damage. The level of enzyme activity measured by the falling number, I'm not going to try and explain what the falling number, because that's kind of irrelevant here, but there's a falling number test that affects the product quality. Yeast in bread dough, for example, requires sugars or honey to develop properly and therefore needs some level of enzyme activity in the dough. If the falling number is too high, enzymes can be added to the flour in various ways to compensate. But if the falling number is too low, you cannot remove the enzymes. You can't get the yeast out of bread. Okay? We do a very similar process today in America. The sample is mixed and washed with a 2% salt solution. I thought that was interesting too. The connections were just amazing how we do this in America in a similar way. I don't know if we follow all the statutes. It's something I want to start looking into soon. But it just blew me away when I stumbled across this. So I think the food regulation are the peace offering and the meal offering. So we have a hospital, that's the first reason. Food regulation is the second. Perhaps this is why the priests were required to wash before entering the tabernacle. Maybe for the same reason this guy does. Don't you want your doctor to wash? What about the guy that prepares your food? That's probably what the labor was for. You'd wash before you deal with all these things. The third reason for this tabernacle is called a judicial system. And what I want to do is show a video. I made this video several years ago. It's kind of what started me off on trying to understand the sacrificial system this way. So if you don't mind.
There are many misconceptions regarding the sacrificial system of the Scriptures. Many think it was a barbaric method to appease the gods with animal sacrifices. But is this what the Scriptures teach? You might be surprised to hear that we practice this same sacrificial system here in America today. Here is an illustration to demonstrate the sacrificial system for today. Here is the sacrificial system of America. Here in America, we have a law. We call this law the United States Constitution. This law is supported by various statutes and judgments, such as the United States Code and the many U.S. court decisions. The Bible is the same. It also has a law called the Ten Commandments located inside the Ark of the Covenant. This law is also supported by various statutes and judgments, such as the law placed on the side of the ark and the many Hebrew court decisions. In America, the people responsible to enforce the law are called the police. In the Bible, the person responsible to enforce the law is the high priest servant. The high priest servant is the one who arrested the Messiah. He is also the one of whom Peter cut his ear off. In America, when you break a law, it is called a crime, and those who commit crimes are called criminals. In the Bible, when you break a law, it is called a sin, and those who commit sins are called sinners. In America, when you commit a crime, you might be arrested. The same is true in the Bible. Stephen was arrested by the Jewish leaders in Acts chapter 6. In America, before you are arrested, the prosecuting attorney will ask for a bench warrant from the judge. In the Bible, the Apostle Paul sought letters from the high priest to persecute or prosecute the believers. Remember, the Apostle Paul was a lawyer who studied under Gamaliel. He would be like our modern-day prosecuting attorneys. In America, when you are arrested, you go to the courthouse. In the Bible, when you are arrested, you go to the tabernacle, which later became the temple. In America, when a criminal is sent to the courthouse, they go to the courthouse jail. In the Bible, when a sinner is sent to the temple, they go to the temple ward. In America, after you pay your court costs, you go to trial in the courtroom. Here you will have a lawyer who will enter a plea on your behalf before a judge wearing a long black robe. Then the judge will listen to witnesses, facts, and evidence. This is always done before a jury of your peers. In the Bible, after you pay your heave offering, you will go to trial in the holy place. The high priest was always to wear his breastplate of judgment in the holy place. Here you will have an intercessor who will enter a prayer for relief on your behalf before the high priest who wears a long purple robe. Then the high priest will listen to witnesses, facts, and evidence. This was always done before the congregation as a jury. In America, if you are found guilty by the judge, you will have to pay a fine. This fine can be a monetary fine, prison time, or even the death penalty in some cases. In the Bible, if you are found guilty by the high priest, you will have to pay a sacrifice. You will have to kill an animal and make a payment in meat. In some cases, you might receive a death penalty by stoning, As you can see, America practices the same sacrificial system that the Bible does. In America, we have the police to enforce the law. The Bible has the high priest servant. In America, when you break the law, it is called a crime. In the Bible, it is called a sin. In America, those who commit crimes are criminals. In the Bible, those who commit sins are sinners. In America, criminals are sent to the courthouse, where they sit in jail until their trial. In the Bible, sinners are sent to the temple, where they sit and ward until their trial. In America, the trial is in the courtroom. In the Bible, the trial is in the holy place. In America, a judge oversees the trial. In the Bible, the high priest oversees the trial. In America, the judge sits behind the bench. In the Bible, the high priest sits behind the altar. In America, a lawyer represents you. In the Bible, an intercessor represents you. In America, you enter a plea. In the Bible, you enter a prayer for relief. In America, you pay court costs. In the Bible, you pay a heave offering. In America, you pay a fine. In the Bible, you pay a sacrifice. In America, this is called the judicial system. In the Bible, this is called the Levitical priesthood. In America, the judicial system has various levels. At the top, you have the Supreme Court. Next, you have the various appellate courts. And finally, the many district courts across the land. You start out at the district courts. If you disagree with their judgment, you can appeal all the way up to the Supreme Court. In the Bible, the Levitical priesthood also has various levels, such as rulers of thousands, rulers of hundreds, rulers of 50s, and rulers of 10s. At the top, you have the temple. Next, you have the rulers of thousands and rulers of hundreds. And finally, you have the rulers of 50s and rulers of 10s. You start out with the rulers of 50s and rulers of 10s. If you disagree with their judgment, you can appeal all the way up to the temple on the Day of Atonement. As you can see, the judicial system of America is the same as the Levitical priesthood of the Bible. The question to ask is this: are we still to follow this same system today? In America, the judge sits in a seat of judgment. It is here where each sentence is given. In the Bible, the priest would sit in Moses' seat. It was here where each sentence was given. The Messiah confirmed in Matthew 23 that we are still to follow this same judicial system today when he said, "The scribes and Pharisees sit in Moses' seat. All therefore whatsoever they bid you observe, that observe and do." Today, we do practice this same judicial system. We call it the civil service. The Bible called it the service of the Levites.
Well, that wasn't religious, was it?
No, it's not. You'll find I don't do that at all. I like to show this video It's kind of corny, I know, but it just kind of lines things up to let us see exactly what the tabernacle was and why it was, and how it fits today. And it's true, America's hundreds of years into it, and we're not doing it quite right, but it's our fault why it's not working right. We're the ones that left God's law, and we're paying the price. And understanding that just gave me a sense of peace, like, oh, now I get it. And but when it lines up like that simple, I think it makes a connection for people. The tabernacle, the Levitical priesthood, is a judicial system. So the high priest servant was its police. Just a different name, same job. When people were found guilty of a crime or sin, you would appear before the judge. While awaiting trial, the criminal or sinner would be sent to jail or ward, and they'd await their trial, just like we do today. The trial was always with witnesses. And the trial was always before the congregation as a jury. One thing that I mentioned last time, congregation in the Old Testament is the Greek word ekklesia in the Septuagint. If you study the Greek word ekklesia does not mean church like we see it today. Ekklesia means judicial system, government. In early America, our church ran the government. We've separated church from state. Now, it doesn't mean we don't do what we're doing here. Obviously, we've given up a lot of power, but we still get together and worship the Lord and learn how to encourage each other and learn God's laws and be willingly obedient. But we've literally gave up the power that our church should have. And I cited a lot of those points, but this is what we're studying now. This is the church in the wilderness. We've lost sight of that. 200 years ago, everybody knew that. What did they say at the revolution? No king but Jesus. They literally meant no king. We want just the judicial system, the common law that we have here in the colonies. That's what they meant by that. It wasn't a religious statement. Okay, so the sin offering was the penalty for breaking God's law. It was for sins of ignorance. And it was for any of God's commands. So you can get a sin offering for any of God's commands. Well, obviously, except for the death penalty ones. This was only done when the sinner was found to be guilty. This is a trial. This is the Bible's way of saying you're going to trial. A trial would take place. It was always in the holy place. That's why they would wear the breastplate of judgment. Obviously, he's going to make a judgment. That's why he's there. There's going to be a trial, and he's going to make a judgment. Or at the gate of the city. Remember, Israel grew. So the tabernacle is the Supreme Court. You're not always going to go to trial there. That's only for the heavy cases that Moses had to see. At the mouth of at least 2 witnesses, and must be found guilty. The priests were to offer a bull, and the congregation was to offer a bull. And the rulers and the commoners were to offer a goat. You see a difference there? God has always had a higher standard for those who rule or for those who are in authority. That's true in the New Testament also. Look what James said. My brethren, be not many masters, knowing that we shall receive the greater condemnation. God did that to the Levites. And you've probably read the requirements to serve in the church or to be an elder or a leader. And they must be blameless, the husband of one wife, vigilant, sober, of good behavior, given to hospitality, apt to teach, not given to wine, no striker, not greedy, not covetous. There's a whole list of things that God held more accountable for those who rule. So there are 17 statutes of the sin offering. The sin offering was for sins of ignorance. The sinner must be found guilty. The priests and the congregation shall offer a young bull, and the rulers and commoners shall offer a kid goat. The offering shall be a male. Commoners shall offer a female. Can substitute 2 doves or pigeons, or the commoners can substitute a 10th part of an ephah of fine flour. So that's interesting to me. That's not always blood. The substitutions are based on financial ability, if he be not able. So if you don't have a lot of money, there's a clause in the law for that. If you're not able, the reference is wealth. God is even gracious to the poor, even during times of sin. I thought that was kind of interesting. 9, the offering shall be without blemish. Remember, someone's going to eat this. The priests are going to eat of it. You can't bring a sick animal to the offering and let the priest eat the sick animal. Okay, shall bring the offering to the door of the tabernacle. The offerer shall lay his hand upon the head of the offering. This is just a description of how to kill the animal. I don't think there's anything religious in it. If you've ever butchered an animal, that's how you do it. The priest shall dip his finger in the blood and sprinkle it 7 times before the veil. This is a bit ceremonial. This is about as religious as I'll get. The priest shall put some of the blood at the horns of the altar of incense. The priest shall put the rest of the blood at the base of the brazen altar. The question is why? The sprinkling of blood. It's always before the veil. Remember when we looked at before the veil? It was put right before the veil. This sin was to be brought before God again on the Day of Atonement. That's what the Day of Atonement's for. You do all this judicial proceedings and you throw it all to God on the Day of Atonement and He wipes it clean and it's gone. So that's kind of what this is symbolizing. You're putting it there to bring it before God on the Day of Atonement. The horns on the altar of incense. The blood on the horns signifies that your prayers were not answered. I'm going to redefine prayer for you real quick. Sorry about that. Prayers in modern law are called pleadings. We call it a prayer for relief to this day. When you go plead in court, it's called a prayer.
That's interesting.
Definitions. Pleadings, according to Bovier's Law Dictionary, the formal entry of the defendant's defense on the record. A prayer in Hebrew is tefillah, which is an intercession, supplication, or prayer. It's the same thing. It's the same definition as plead. Prayer has always meant pleading in our modern law. Plea in bar is one, this is Bovier's Law Dictionary, is one which shows some ground for barring the defeat or defeating the actions and makes prayer. And we miss that today. All in our law. You can go to Bovier's Law Dictionary and you go to Black's Law Dictionary. Prayer is all over it. What is religion doing in this law book? It's not religion. So the prayers or pleadings, you were found guilty. So your prayers were rejected. You put it on the altar and it needs to be forgiven. The base of the brazen altar, I think it's simply to dispose of the rest of the toxic substance. Okay, so when we recognize what the Day of Atonement was for and why they're doing it, that's what it's symbolizing. Does it also symbolize what Christ did for us? Absolutely. The New Testament talks about the sprinkling of blood over and over again. But the reality, what they were doing, they were anticipating the Day of Atonement. The priest shall burn all the fat, kidneys, loins, and liver. We've gone over all this. They're all going to be kind of similar, so I'm just going to go quickly on this. The remainder of the offering shall be burned outside the camp. And the priest that offers shall eat of the sin offering as a payment. So that was his payment. The next one's the trespass offering. That's the penalty for breaking God's law also, but there's a distinction. This is for sins of ignorance, but it's also for sins of intent, intentional sin. People don't recognize this sometimes, but a lot of people say that sins of intent or intentional sins are not part of the offerings. But it's not said intentional sins, but these are intentional sins. Lying to your neighbor, has deceived his neighbor, lying concerning it, swearing falsely. Those are all intentional sins, even though it doesn't say sins of intent.
Right, and the word trespass in the Hebrew.
That's what it
actually
means, exactly. Guilt.
Yeah.
This was only done when the sinner was found to be guilty, just like all the rest. It carries punitive penalties, though. So if you're doing a sin of intent, now you have punitive penalties. After the shekels of the sanctuary, a misdemeanor would be 4 times restored. It doesn't say misdemeanor, but that's what our misdemeanors mean today. And a felony is 5 times restored. We don't do that today. If we hammered people, sin would probably disappear a little bit.
Right. You mean hammer? You mean literally hammer?
Well, let's put it this way. If we made someone go buy a goat, kill it, cut it up, burn it on the altar, and then pay a fine also, how many people are going to speed after that?
Oh, okay.
I think it's a great deterrent to sin because you have to work to get your forgiveness. You have to work to be, to wipe it away. I mean, it's not like it's just easy like you write a check. Today, we can do it all online. It's so easy. If you have the money, it's not a burden at all. 1, you shall offer a ram without blemish. Already it's a heftier fine.
Yeah.
Shall offer restitution in silver based on the estimated value of damages. So the priest is going to have to make a decision based on your intent and how bad it was. A fifth part of the estimation shall be given to the priest. So the priest actually makes more money on the trespass offering. I hate to put it that way, but they do. They must be found guilty. That means there's a trial. And shall offer for intentional sins. Shall kill the offering at the door of the tabernacle. We've gone through all this. This is just a description of how to kill the animal. The priest shall burn the fat, kidneys, loins, and liver, and the priest shall eat of the offering in the holy place. So that's his payment. Just tells you how to kill it. And this is punitive damages. We're kind of doing that in America today. We're just not tough enough. The difference between the sin offering and trespass offering is for intentional sins, and it carries punitive damages. And we do that today. We're just not as tough as we should be. The burnt offering was a contract offering. This is the last offering, and we're almost done. Noah, when the covenant was ratified, did a burnt offering. Abraham, when the covenant was ratified, did a burnt offering. Moses, when the covenant was ratified, did a burnt offering. In fact, the whole Abrahamic covenant described this whole process of the burnt offering. God put him to sleep. The offerings were cut, and he passed through as a burning lamp. He brought it up again in Jeremiah when he said, "And I will give the men that have transgressed my covenant, which have not performed the words of the covenant which they have made before me, when they cut the calf in two and passed between the parts thereof." What was this? Well, here's what John Gill said about it. This was a custom used in making and confirming contracts or covenants. A calf or some other creature were cut in pieces, and the parts laid in order, and the covenantees passed between these parts, signifying thereby that if they did not fulfill the engagements they entered into, they imprecated to be cut to pieces as that creature was. It makes things a little more serious all of a sudden, doesn't it? The burnt offering. When the Bible says make a covenant, it means cut a covenant. The word make is karath, which means to cut. So it really should be translated cut a covenant. Covenant is berith. You guys know what that means. The only offering that was cut in pieces, guess what it was? The burnt offering. Contracts today come from the burnt offering. Follow this train of thought here, you guys. You would say cut the covenant. That's a phrase that's used in ancient times. Cut the offering. Cut a contract. Cut a deal. This is where the blood handshake comes from. That's why we call it the blood of the covenant. It's the burnt offering. These all come from the burnt offering, which is why we call it is called the blood of the covenant. So what the Hebrews would do, if they're doing a big contract, they do a burnt offering. It's how you ratify. We would call it notarization today. We've oversimplified it today. And what are the consequences, probably? Well, I'm telling you, if you're going to do a burnt offering, kill an animal, and go through this, you're probably not going to break that covenant. You're probably going to keep it. If you're buying a house, and you're probably going to do it. The way I like to describe it, when an animal dies, everything gets real all of a sudden. And you're just held to a different level of accountability.
Well, especially if you break that covenant and you're going to be cut in pieces.
Yes, exactly. It makes a difference. God's really serious about this. If we just notarize it, and if you break it, it's, we'll give you a little fine. But it's kind of the same thing. This was done for national offerings. That was the daily offerings. The Sabbath offerings. The new month offerings. And the feast offerings. Okay? This basically was done to confirm the covenants. So you think about what the tabernacle is doing, forgiving sin. And they started off confirming the covenant and they ended confirming the covenant. All the feast days did the same thing. You're ratifying the covenant once again because we're sinners. That's why you would do this. That's nationally. Personal offerings after childbirth, well, that's the curse, you guys. To cleanse open wounds, to cleanse after from leprosy, defiling by a dead body, and for the Nazirite vow. That's a contract directly at the bottom. So again, this confirms the covenant. Now the burnt offering, if you think about it this way, it confirms the covenant, That's a ratification of the covenant. But it also renews a covenant. Why do we need to renew a covenant? Because we're in breach of contract. We violated an obligation, engagement, or duty. When we break God's covenant, that's what the burnt offering was for. It renewed that covenant. There were 13 statutes. Shall be a daily offering morning and evening. Wealthy are to offer a bull. You can see how some of these are national and some of these are personal. The middle class shall offer a sheep or a goat. The poor shall offer 2 turtle doves or 2 young pigeons. It must be a male and it must be without blemish. Shall kill the animal at the door of the tabernacle, just like the others. Shall place your hand on the head of the offering to kill it. That's just a description of how you kill it. Shall cut the animal in pieces. That's relating it back to that tradition Abraham did. But look, do you see how this is a good example of the spirit of the law. This is not following the letter of what Abraham did. Is it? But it's following the spirit. And that's how we need to understand God's law. That'll help us see it in America today. And it's all over the place in America. We're just doing it wrong. Some of the things we're doing that are more in the spirit of the law is okay. But there's kind of a gray area. We got to decide where that line is. You know, this is an example in my mind of the letter of the law versus the spirit of the law. It changed all of a sudden here. They're not actually walking through the pieces like the tradition said. The priest shall sprinkle the blood around the brazen altar. It shall be wholly consumed except the skin. The skin goes to pay for the priest. God always pays the priest for their work. It's actually one of his commandments. The skin is left for the priest. The penalty is excommunication for not following the burnt offering. There are 2 other offerings, but they're not really offerings. And we've already gone over a lot of them. If you look at the 5 offerings, the burnt offering, meal offering, peace offering, sin offering, and trespass offering. The heave offering and the wave offering are part of each one of those. And we've kind of already gone over a lot. This is the payment to the priest. So each one of those offerings contains something either called a heave offering or a wave offering or sometimes both. The heave and wave offering, heave is teruma, which means a present, especially in sacrifice or as tribute. It's a portion of the gift. Wave is tenufa, which is a brandishing, the official undulation of a sacrificial offering. I get frustrated with some of these definitions because they're very religious. But that was basically the whole of the gift. The heave offering was giving part. The wave offering was giving a whole. Some of the examples: the shoulder heave and the breast wave of the peace offerings. Gold, silver, and brass were wave offerings also when they started the tabernacle. It's not translated wave, but it's the same word. Cloth, oil, incense, and stones were wave offerings in the tabernacle. And bread is a wave offering. Whenever the offering is going to pay for the tabernacle or its service or the priests, it's a wave or a heave offering. It's to be brought to the tabernacle, given to the priest for payment, to be heaved up by the priest. It's eaten in the holy place with children or with their family. The family must be clean to eat. Anything that was going into the holy place must be clean. That means you're not sick, you're not contaminated, you don't have any kind of a disease.
And you weren't around a dead person.
Yes, well, exactly. That's what I mean by that. If a family member just died and you had to bury them, whatever they had is now possibly with you. It's a bad word, but we kind of quarantine. Yeah, we don't like that word in America, but it's a good principle.
Yeah.
You know, when we're sick, we stay home.
We should.
As a teacher, I get frustrated at all these kids coughing and sneezing in my classroom. I was like, stay home. So I totally understand. The right shoulder of the peace offerings, the offered for meal offerings, from the sin and trespass offerings, these are all examples of it. The skin of the burnt offering, and the tenth of all tithes, And it's part of the spoils taken in war. All of these, because our civil service can't get them because they're doing work in the tabernacle, go to the priests. The wave offering is almost the same list. I'm just going to go through them really quick. Given to the priests for payments. To be waived by the priest. It's a different movement. Eaten in the holy place with your family. The family must be clean to eat. You can see how these are very similar statutes. To be the best of their kind. For the consecration of a priest, you'd give a wave offering. The breast of all peace offerings is a wave offering. From the sin and trespass offering are wave offerings. For the first fruits of crops. And for the jealousy offering. And finally, the boiled shoulder of the Nazarite peace offering. I wanted to go through fast because we're going to touch on, we've already touched on some of them. The rest of them, they're actually covered in a lot of the other statutes. Like we haven't talked about the Nazarite vow yet. But when we do go over that, we'll understand, we'll see those. The last one is a drink offering. There's 4 statutes for that. It shall be given with the burnt peace and meal offerings. Shall be a quarter of a hin for a lamb. Shall be a third of a hin for a ram. And shall be a half of a hin for a bull. What was the drink offering? It's very simple, you guys. The drink offering was offered with the other offerings, with the continual burnt offering, with the Nazarite vow, and given during the feasts. With the burnt offering, peace offering, and meat offerings, it was poured out on the altar. This was only a portion of the offering. The rest of the offering was drank with the meal. Our modern toast, did you know, comes from drink offering? When you raise the glass, it comes from raising the drink offering and pouring it out. We see that in movies today sometimes, pouring out an offering. This is a modern thing we do. We're not quite doing it right, but it's something we do. It's done in celebration and feasting. Okay, so the drink offering was basically the drinks for all these offerings. That's all it was.
Who wants to eat their food without something to drink?
Exactly. So what is the spirit of these laws? Remember, the spirit of the laws, the intent of the lawmaker is the law. Can we meet the spirit of these laws today? I honestly think we can. For example, the burnt offering was for contracts. A burnt offering, we call this notarization today. Remember, God keeps covenant for 1,000 generations. He is the faithful God, which keeps covenant to 1,000 generations to those that love Him and keep His commandments. Keeping our contracts is very important to God. He Himself takes great joy in keeping His word. We ought to be men and women who keep our word. Every time we say something, we need to do it. We used to do that in America. It used to be that we could shake hands and you would know that when someone gives you their word, they were going to keep it or die trying. Today, that's not very true. Perhaps America should hold people more accountable to breach of contract. If we did, maybe we would go back to that time where people would keep their word in America. The sin offering is a fine for committing a crime. And the trespass offering is a fine with punitive damages. The sin offering, we simply call this a fine today. The trespass offering, this is what we would call a fine, but also carries punitive damages. So when you commit a sin, that's not quite as bad as committing a trespass. Perhaps the spirit of this law is simply that America would have tougher punishments to crime. Look at it this way. If every time someone got a ticket for speeding, they had to go buy a lamb, kill that lamb, cut it up, and burn it on an altar, and then pay a fine as well, I guarantee the rate of speeding would drop in America. The peace offering is food regulation. We do this in America today. America does this offering today. Our judicial system still regulates meat. In fact, they require that we bleed out our animals and trim off the fat. The only place I can think of that we actually break this law is by allowing unclean meat such as pig or shellfish to be used and allowing too much fat to be left in the meat. Today, I believe it's 30% that we allow in our meat. This is far too much fat that we allow in our meat. We should require that meat be at least 90% lean or more. The meal offering was for food regulation for crops. America does this offering today as well. Our judicial system regulates our crops. We break this law by a couple of different ways. First, we should not allow GMOs. Leviticus 19:19 specifically forbids this. We also should not eat fruit from trees under 4 years of age. These are the two statutes that Americans probably break regarding the meal offering. The heave offering and wave offerings, they were payments for our priests. Those are our judges in our judicial system. America does this offering to this very day. We pay our judges well in America. We may not use physical property like a lamb or a meal. We simply use the monetary system that America has founded. In fact, 10% of all fines from our state courts are paid to our federal courts. This is a commandment that comes straight from God. Our state courts are the Levitical priesthood. Our federal courts are the Aaronic priesthood. We do this statute to this very day. The drink offering was a toast and celebration. Drink offerings were always done with other offerings. This was always done in celebration, and the drink offering is what turned into the Greek libations, which turned into our modern toast. The drink offering was simply the drink that was prepared with the meals that we ate from our offerings. So, quick review. The burnt offering was for contracts. Do we do that today? Do we sign contracts? Do we notarize them?
Yes.
Would it be a lot more effective if we actually had to go through that process?
Possibly.
I think it would. I really do. I think if America were doing these things, we would be better off. The sin offering was a fine for committing a crime. If we actually had to kill an animal and go through that work, or is it going to deter us from sin?
Possibly.
I think it is. The trespass offering, a fine with punitive damages, same thing. Remember what Paul said? The law is not for a righteous man, but for sinners. Most of us would never even deal with this. How often do you go to court? That's as often as you'd be doing this. It's not like it's a big deal. The sinners would be going to court dealing with this. We wouldn't, because we're choosing to do what's right. So we don't want to look at it as anything more than that. The peace offering was for food regulation. We actually do this quite well in America. The meal offering was for food regulation. I don't think we do this as well, but we have a lot of genetically modified in our food today. The heave offering was payment for the priests, and the wave offering was payment for the priests. We pay our judicial system quite well. So we actually do this quite well in America. And the drink, we do. They get paid quite well. And the drink offering was a toasted celebration in our feasting and for the priests. The spirit of the law is the intent of the lawmaker is the law. Can we meet the spirit of these laws today? Do you think we can?
Yes.
I think we can. And I think in many ways we're doing it.